Imagine the scene, a young, newly married couple, vibrating with the conquest of the first home. A two-bedroom apartment, brand new, gift from the in-laws. It looked like the beginning of a dream, until a sinister detail came to light. The property was still in the name of the generous donors. It was the trigger for the mother-in-law, with all the elegance of a panther about to attack, release in fury. You lost your judgment? And what will be left to my son if this marriage goes wrong? The floor trembled under her daughter-in-law's feet, which didn't even imagine what would come next. But this is just the tip of the iceberg of a story that goes far beyond four walls. Allow me to share with you an account that reveals how true love is not meant by the square meters you have, but for the greatness of the heart that offers itself. The first meeting between Dar and the groom's family was a true minefield of evaluating looks. As he crossed the door of the imposing Kuzminich apartment, where every detail, from the glossy bronze sign to the glossy that rival the sun, the young woman felt the weight of a silent judgment. The mother-in-law, an imposing figure wrapped in expensive silk, did not need words to make her verdict clear. The simple dress, the designer-free shoes, the handless bag in the corners all shouted outskirts in a world where only luxury had a voice. Delighted, Dar murmured, extending his hand with a tense smile. The cold and brief tightness he received in response was worth more than 1,000 words. She was already convicted even before she was known. While the hostess settled in what looked like a throne disguised as an armchair, the questions began, sharp as blades. And their parents, in which they are concerned? The sincere answer, a worker's father, a quality-controlling mother, was received with a nod that said everything. Poor little ones, as they are, predictable. The night dragged on as a sentence. Among stories of influential contacts, family jewelry displayed with disdain, and veiled comments on social levels, Dar felt each word like a blow. Until the son, finally unable to endure the cruelty disguised as concern, interrupted. Mother, enough. Dar is amazing. The sweet and false that followed was worse than any insult. Of course, son. I just want the best for you. Or do you think she can offer it? The next day, the scenario was reversed. The modest house of Dar's parents, with their walls that kept decades of stories, the smell of homemade cake and the heat that no expensive marble could imitate, received Keel with a simplicity that left it speechless. The father, with his calloused hands of years of honest work, greeted him with a firm squeeze and a look that spoke of integrity. The mother, wiping her hands on her apron, was already going to serve tea like a banquet. There was no ostentation, but there was something much rarer, authenticity. While enjoyed delicacies made with love and talked about dreams and routines, Keel realized something that luxury could never buy. There, between sincere laughs and memories exposed in faded photos, there was a wealth that his own family had lost a long time. Your parents are extraordinary people, he confessed on the way back. Dar smiled, but a shadow hovered over her heart. She turns her mother tearing the shopping list to save, her father unfolding into extra shifts to buy a new towel to make a good impression. They did not know that for the mother-in-law, they were already convicted of the simple crime of not belonging to their circle. The wedding ceremony should be intimate, a reflection of their love, small, welcoming, among those who really mattered. But the mother-in-law even transformed into a ring. A restaurant up to, or what are you going to think about my contacts? We paid, he tried to argue Keel. Just because I go. You help, the mother answered, with a generosity that smelled the blackmail. Each refusal of Dar was interpreted as ingratitude, every own choice as an affront. In the end, the party happened modest, full of true tears and tight hugs, while the mother-in-law passed the night with a bitter smile, whispering to those who wanted to hear that that was just a true marriage. The first months of marriage were in a tiny conjugate on the periphery, where the bathroom was bad for a person and the kitchen remembered another closet. But Dar, with his silent magic, turned that space into a home, hand-sewn curtains, colored pillows, flowers that brought to life to the naked walls. Keel arrived exhausted from work, but the smell of dinner was prepared to renew his strength. Together they dreamed loudly, even if the reality was hard, each reel saved, every exit cancelled, every desire postponed in the name of a future where they had a corner of them finally. In 2 years, we joined the entrance, calculated Keel, flipping through pamphlets from developers. We took a financing, something small, but ours. Dar nodded, though he knew, between the tight accounts and the wages they barely gave to the rent, the arrival line seemed increasingly distant. And then the mother-in-law's weekly visits arrived, always with his clinical eye and sharp tongue. In decent families, parents help their children with housing, she solitaire, as she comments on time. But I understand, not everyone has conditions. Dar bit the tongue. His parents worked without rest, sacrificing even rest to send any help. They do what they can, he defended himself. How cute, answered the mother-in-law, with a smile that didn't come to the eyes. I just hope that when my son does 30, he is not still renting such a hole. What she didn't see or didn't want to see was that that hole was filled with something that no luxury apartment could offer, love that warms, dreams that unite, and the certainty that, in the end, a home is built with much more than bricks and documents. Those acidic comments on living in a decent place, not in this cubicle they call the studio, hurt as stab wounds. Dosha via the Kirill jaw contract, the fingers tighten into invisible fists. He loved his mother, but every veiled criticism of his wife eroded him inside. Mother, enough. Explored one day, the trembling voice of containment. We realize alone. Of course, son, agreed Evelina Borisovna with a theatrical sigh, as if patience was her greatest virtue. I just want to help. I have contacts in real estate, I can get something good, if Denka were a little more, how to say, grateful. Grateful why? At a little disguised as a counsel. By comparisons poisoned with daughters-in-law that knew your place. For the eyes that weighed as judges silent. Dosha learned to swallow the words, but anger grew inside it, cold and dense like the ice at the bottom of the freezer. He kept every cutting comment, every fake smile, each time Evelina Borisovna mentioned, unintentionally, how Kirill's friends had more right wives. And at these times, I thought of the parents. In the mother, who called every day just to hear her voice. In the father, who fixed every tap that leaked on the rented kitchenette without ever charging a thank you. In the brutal contrast between the love that asked for nothing in return and the generosity of Evelina Borisovna, who always came with conditions. Sometimes the desire to explode was so strong that Dosha felt the metallic taste of the revolt in the mouth. But he was silent. By Kirill. Because he knew that any confrontation would only put him in the middle of the crossfire. Until the day it has changed. When Kirill told her mother about the gifts of the in-laws, Evelina Borisovna froze in the middle of the gesture, the cup of coffee hanging between the table and the lips. What do you mean by bought an apartment? He repeated, lowering the cup with a calculated slowness. Well, they sold their own, they joined the economies and bought one of 2 bedrooms for us. Imagine, Mom, we will finally have a real home. The silence that followed was so dense that you could cut with a knife. Kirill did not realize how his mother's face was, from surprise to skepticism, from skepticism to poisoned distrust. And in the name of who is this wonder? Evelina Borisovna's voice was a dangerous whisper, like the wind before the storm. Dosha's parents. They said it was just caution. Caution against what? She got up from a jump, the chair gritting against the floor. Against son-in-law, perhaps? Against my son? Kirill tried to protest, but his mother was already in the fiery monologue. You're being used, boy. This is pure coup. They gave you a house for you to live, but they got scripture. And if this wife of yours here, the term sounded like an offense, solved to divorce tomorrow? What's up to you? Nothing. Only debts, if it wasn't all planned from the beginning. Mom, what are you talking about? We love each other. Love. Evelina Borisovna gave a dry laugh. Only fools believe this today. Smart people think of guarantees, contracts, in the future. And you, my son, are being wrapped around these smart guys. Kirill left confused, his mother's words echoing as hammered in his head. Why didn't you consult me? Why didn't you put it on my name? Do they really not trust me? Dosha realized his anguish, but every time he asked, he diverted the subject with "it's nothing." Meanwhile, Evelina Borisovna spent the night in course, plotting. If her son had no courage to act, she would do it for him. At 9 a.m. the next morning, she was before the door of Dosha's in-laws. Clear hair, blurred lipstick, eyes burning with the fury of those who think they are right. Sergei Nikolaevich opened the door still in pajamas, returning from the night of work. Evelina Borisovna, surprised. Enter. What happened? What happened? She broke out like a hurricane in the room. What happened is that you decided to make my son an idiot. What are you talking about? Sergei's face Nikolaevich closed. From your hypocrisy. Shouted at her. They bought an apartment and put it on your name. Do you think we are blind? This is called exploration. Tatiana Mikhailovna emerged from the kitchen, scared. What is happening? Your mother is telling me that you are stealing my son's future. Evelina Borisovna is not contained. They gave him a house to live, but they stayed with scripture. This is a trap. I demand that they pass the property to Kirill right now. Calm down. Sergei's voice Nikolaevich was a sharp ice. Let's talk like adults. Calm down. She laughed, hysterical. When my son's future is at stake. Pass this deed to him, or I go to justice. The house was bought with our money, replied Sergei Nikolaevich, immovable as a stone. We have every right to put it on our behalf. Your money? Evelina Borisovna solved a laugh. You always got crumbs. Where did you take money to an apartment? They borrowed and now they want my son to pay, right? Tatiana Mikhailovna paled. We sold our apartment, he mumbled, the trembling voice. Ah, of course. And they joined the economies of fairy tales. Interrupted Evelina Borisovna, sarcastic. They invented a scheme to live at the expense of my son. They let him live there, but separate, he is on the street. And why would they separate? Sergei's face Nikolaevich darkened. Why not? What does Kirill get if this happens? She hit her foot. Your daughter keeps the house, and my son? What's up? My daughter is not an enjoyer. Tatiana Mikhailovna raised her voice. The trembling hands. It is not. Evelina Borisovna mocked. He married him just to get out of poverty, and now that he has a house, it may well drop it. So what? What is left for my son? Sergei Nikolaevich got up slowly. His normally affable face was sculpted in stone. The icy eyes made Evelina Borisovna back instinctively. So you think, said low, every syllable a blow, that in case of divorce, my son deserves something? It is clear. She shouted. Half of the house, at the very least. He's the husband. And what did your child contribute to this house? Sergei Nikolaevich stepped forward. What a penny did he give? What sweat did he spend? He works. Sustains the wife. Ah, hold. A bitter laugh escaped from him. My daughter has paid her own bills for years, including the rent of the kitchenette where you lived. Your wonder son could only spend the salary and complain about life. How dare? Evelina Borisovna poured, the red cheeks. I dare, roared Sergei Nikolaevich, making her shudder. Dare to come to my house to demand that I deliver what is mine to your son, who has not moved a straw to help. What kind of mother teaches the son to be a parasite? He's not parasite. He is a programmer. Programmer who in 3 years of marriage did not gather a penny to a ceiling. Sergei Nikolaevich advanced, her shadow shaking against the wall. Programmer who still breastfeeds at mom's tissue, who makes ball for him every week as if it were a. Continues. They slipped into his mind as a slow poison, corrupting any trace of gratitude that was still remains. Think alone. 3 years living here, 3 years paying accounts, 3 years being the husband of this wife, and what do I have? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The mother's words echoed with a wicked logic, transforming generosity into a trap, love into transaction. He looked at the newly hired walls, the couch where he had spent nights watching movies with Dar, to the kitchen where she prepared her favorite dishes, and suddenly everything seemed borrowed to her. As if he were a tolerated tenant, a guest who could be expelled at any moment. You're weird. Dar dropped the plate in the sink with a dry crack. Her fingers trembled slightly, but the voice was firm, as if the storm was already present. Since when do you care about documents and inheritance? Before, you didn't even know where we kept scripture. Keel turned, leaning his back in the fridge. The cold metal burned through the shirt. I didn't need to know before, he said, and bitterness in his voice was new, like a bad taste that couldn't spit. But now I understand that ignorance is convenient only for those who already have everything guaranteed. Da crossed his arms. Her eyes, those same eyes that made him laugh when they lost themselves in their own, now they shone with something dangerous, almost metallic. Guaranteed? He repeated, as if the word were an insult. My parents worked 30 years at the factory, saving each rubles for that. Do you think they owe something to you? What do I owe? It's not a matter of duty. Keel lifted his hands, as if he could contain the fire he had lit. It's a matter of justice. I am your husband. This is our home. Our. Da's laugh was short, without humor. Did you sign a roll? Pay any installment? Or is there only here, like a parasite that my mother has already called? The word hit him as a punch. He advanced, his fists clenched, but stopped midway through. Not out of fear, but because deep down she knew she was right. And that was what hurt more. I work, he spat. I support this house. Do you think it's easy to hear every day I'm useless because I don't have an apartment in my name? So by one, Da didn't go back. Instead of coveting what is not yours. Silence. One of those silences that weigh like lead, that suffocate. Keel turned to the window. Outside, the snow fell in thick flakes, covering Moscow with a mane. The white and indifferent. Justice. The word spinned in his head, distorted, like a broken mirror. He remembered the day Da cried when he received the keys, the father-in-law's tight hug, the hoarse voice of Sergei Nikolaevich saying, "Take care of it." And now he was there, poisoned by his mother's own words, turning gratitude into resentment. You have changed, Dasa murmured, and there was such a deep sadness in his voice that for a second he almost repented. Almost. Or maybe I just opened my eyes, he said, without looking at her. She said nothing more. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. That same night, while Da pretended to sleep across the bed, Keel sent a message. Mom, I think you were right. I need to talk to a lawyer. The answer came instantly, as if Evelina Borisovna were waiting, crouched in the shadow like a predator. Finally. Tomorrow I mill it an appointment. And don't worry, son. Let's recover what's yours by right. He closed his eyes. Right. What a convenient word. What a perfect excuse for greed. Across the city, Sergei Nikolaevich lit a cigarette in the dark of the porch, watching the smoke dissipate in the cold air. He knew. I always knew that this woman would not give up. And now, like a general who gives the battle, he squeezed the phone in his hands. Hello, lawyer? Here is Sergei Nikolaevich. I need you to prepare some rolls, urgent. Those words fell on fertile soil, feeding the resentment that had sprouted in Kirill for months. Why should I live here as a guest? The question echoed in his mind like a mantra. Why can't I decide on my own home, just like my wife? And as he repeated these arguments to himself, he did not realize how anger distorts every word, turning justice into greed. From the other end of the apartment, Dosha watched the husband transform. The man who once laughed at his jokes and kissed his hands now frowns at the forehead as he entered the house, as if each wall, each furniture, each picture were a personal affront. The neighbors ask if the house is mine, he repeated, as if the doubt of others were a knife stuck in his pride. And I don't know what to answer. The truth, I live in my wife's house, sounded like a defeat. But the lie he wanted to hear, it's ours, was an illusion that would only feed the fire. The dinners became minefields. Kirill cut the meat with sudden gestures, while his mother-in-law, with a forced smile, tried to fill the silence with questions about the work. How was the day, dear? He responded with monosyllables, his eyes fixed on the plate, as if each fork was an act of resistance. Until, one night Dosha's patience has run out. You're unbearable, she whispered when her parents withdrew to the room. Unbearable? Kirill laughed, bitter. I just want what is fair. Or do you think it is normal that I don't have any rights about the house where I sleep? Fair? Dosha repeated, as if the word burned her. Do you want justice or want control? Because this house was bought by my parents for me. To our family. Not to be divided as a war button. Butim. Her voice went up. I'm your husband, not an enemy. Then stop acting like one. The silence that followed was more sharply than any scream. Kirill pushed the chair back, ranging her against the floor. They are using you, his mother's voice echoed in his thoughts. One day they will throw you out like a rag. He looked at Dosha, his eyes shining with a mixture of fury and something that seemed dangerously with hatred. You chose their side, he said softly. Always. And he left, leaving behind the smell of food burning and the weight of a truth that neither wanted to admit. That was no longer a home. It was a ring. And the fight had barely started. Meanwhile, backstage, the true strategist moved his pieces. Evelina Borisovna smiled on the phone, the sweet voice like poisoned honey. Claudia Semenovna, my dear, you were right. They will not give in. Not without pressure. Across the line, the former court officer laughed, low and hoarse. Pressure is little, my friend. What this boy needs is an ultimatum. And I know exactly how to get it. The temporary guest had settled in a new job, with a higher salary, but not a kopeck was not even spent on family needs. All the money was meticulously saved for his future home, a calculated gesture, a silent statement of war. I will buy my own apartment. And then we will see who humiliates. Evelina Borisovna smiled, pleased. Its slow erosion strategy worked to perfection. Hold on for now, son, she whispered, like a snake curled in her ear. Gather money to your corner. When you have, divorce without guilt. At least you won't have empty hands. Meanwhile, Dosha built her own trench. Ascension career, coveted projects, a name that was beginning to shine in the design market. The work was his refuge, the only thing that still gave him the illusion of control. In the 5th year of marriage, the naked truth was imposed. They were no longer a couple. They were two strangers under the same roof, exchanging complicities for educated silences, dreams shared by separate bank accounts. Kirill told each rubles spared. Dosha expanded your business. And both secretly designed their lives without each other. The divorce came as a sigh of relief, without shouts, without accusations, without the cheap drama Evelina Borisovna expected so much. I'm moving to my mother's house, Kirill announced, the rough voice of emotional hangover. I will come in with the papers next week. Okay, said Dosha, too serene for his taste. And don't think I'll want a penny from this house, he spat, as if the words burned. I'm not a beggar. I wouldn't even think about it, Dosha lied, repeating his father's words as a mantra. For justice, you only have the right to what you invested. 5 years of joint life, reduced to a cold calculation of bricks and mortar. The door knocked for the last time. Evelina Borisovna received her son with a smile of victory. After all, he had escaped from the clutches of those profiteers. He finally opened his eyes, he said, caressing his shoulder as if he were a trophy. Didn't I warn? They just wanted to suck you until you dry. But the euphoria was short-lived. It was soon clear that Kirill had not returned as a winner, but as a castaway, no wife, without the apartment he had coveted so much, without even the dignity of an independent man. Why didn't you require half of the home in court? Because there was no right, he said, exhausted. 5 years of marriage, mother. 5 years. So, the house was from her parents before divorce. You who were weak, who did not require the transfer of the property, you said not to be in a hurry. I told you not to be an idiot. The days in the maternal house became a purgatory. Evelina Borisovna gave her a respite. His cowardice left us with nothing, he shouted as Kirill sinks more and more in alcohol, bitterness, in the feeling that his life had been a badly thrown bluff. A house like that, and you let it escape. I would have ripped with your teeth. Did you want me to steal what wasn't mine? Don't steal, get back what was your right. You were the husband. It was, he repeated, bitter. It was. Meanwhile, across the city, the house that Kirill had hated so much breathed relief. Without their presence, the rooms seemed wider, the less dense air. Dosha rediscovered the pleasure of living there not as a prisoner, but as owner of his own destiny. A year after the divorce, met Mika. Illinois architects, like her, but with a crucial difference. He never asked for the value of the property, never calculated footage with greedy looks. What a beautiful apartment, he commented on the first visit, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. The parents gifted to me, she answered. waiting for the inevitable question about inheritance, divisions, hidden clauses. Lucky, Mikhail said. For having parents like that. And it was just. When they decided to get married, it was he who suggested the prenuptial agreement. You have your goods, I have mine. Let's make it clear what you are, if life surprises us. Dosha stared at him, astonished. I had never met such a transparent man or so safe from himself so as not to suck on what was not his own. The marriage was simple, between laughs and hugs, without the weight of petty expectations. Sergei Nikolaevich and Tatiana Mikhailovna embraced the new son-in-law with an affection that bordered on gratitude. This is a real man, the father muttered to his wife, watching how Mikhail helped in the kitchen, listened to advice, treated Dosha as an equal. Don't covet, don't humiliate, work with your own hands. As soon as a family is built. 3 years later, came the first child. 2 years later, the daughter. The children filled the house with a sweet noise, turning it into the home that Kirill never knew how to value. Sergei Nikolaevich, already with fragile health, built a playground in the backyard of Dacha. Tatiana Mikhailovna knitted blankets and stuffed animals, the agile fingers despite the years. That's why it was worth living, said the old man, swinging his grandson in his arms, while daughter-in-law and son-in-law planned the future, a future that was not a battle for the first time, but a collaboration. Meanwhile, in the house Kirill had so despised, the children grew intelligent, happy, surrounded by a love he never knew how to recognize. Sergei Nikolaevich did not live to see them adults, but their values echoed in each laugh, in each decision made with integrity. His legacy were not walls or documents, but something much rarer, a family that chose to be free of hatred, greed, the currents others called love star. And this legacy, like a resistant seed, flourished in the next generation. The grandfather was a hero, Dosha repeated to her children, her eyes shining with the same tight stubbornness she had inherited. He worked a lifetime not to fill coffers, but for his grandchildren to breathe lighter air, and taught me a lesson that no court could erase: never bow his head in the face of arrogance, never negotiating with injustice. It was an inheritance that did not fit in wills, but in the daily choices of those who refused to be a victim. Sometimes, as he walked with his grandchildren through the park, the one where Kirill's words once tried to poison the floor, Tatiana Mikhailovna smiled by repeating her husband's phrases in a low voice. He put that old insolent in his place. And in that quietly triumphant smile, it was proof that Sergei Nikolaevich had won the war that really mattered. Not that of roles or properties, but the battle for what no law could steal, the dignity of a family that has chosen every day to be stronger than grudge. Justice, after all, is not measured in square meters, but at the time of the story itself.